People always ask me if I can speak to animals. And over the years, I've had the chance to interact with everything you can imagine, and I've been bitten by a large number of them. The thing that has brought me the most inside the animal mind and into their world has been the times when animals have been wounded or needed help. I've had the chance to rehabilitate everything from squirrels to birds, toucans, wounded snakes, giant anteaters. I've even had the chance to spend time with rehabilitated herds of semi-wild elephants in the jungle, which is an incredibly unique experience and allows you into the mind of the animal in their environment. And so the question of whether or not we can speak to animals, I counter with, you don't need to. Not that long ago, I was walking through the forest and we saw something flopping around on the ground. Now, I had just come from a swim in the river. I was with my girlfriend and I was distracted looking at some monkeys or something, and she noticed on the ground that there was something that was flopping, looking wounded. And if you know the jungle, it's called the greatest natural battlefield for a reason. Anything that's wounded isn't gonna last long. And when we found this little toucan, there was already things attacking it. This little toucan had lost most of the plumage on its neck, looked extremely unhealthy. I wonder if the attack had started in the nest because it had these foreign bodies in it, like huge botflies, really devastating, horrendous looking intrusions into its skin. It was covered in mites. It looked like it was in immense pain. So I took my shirt off, I caught the bird, and then, you know, as we're carrying it up to the station, we thought, okay, we're gonna do the best we can to get this bird cleaned up. But if you've done a lot of wildlife rehab, if you've worked on a farm, you know that certain times there's just moments where animals are so hurt that the most humane thing you can do is put them down. And so with this bird right away, that was definitely a question for me. But at the same time, this little bird was, you know, pecking at my fingers and sort of opening his mouth and sort of had that fight still in him, and he was ready to go. And so we got him back to the station, and I've only rehabilitated one toucan before this one, and it was a toucan that got hit by a hawk and was wounded at the wing. But that was much easier because it was an adult, healthy toucan, and it was just healing the wound. This little one had so many of these horrible parasites and then all the mites running all over it. So I got on the phone with an expert. I called Magali at Amazon Shelter, and now this is the only reputable wildlife rehabilitation center in the Madre de Dios. These people are experts. Magali has devoted her entire life to saving Amazonian wildlife. So in a region where we have loggers and gold miners and deforestation, there's going to be animals that are orphaned. There's going to be animals that need help. And so Magali she's really set herself apart with the howler monkeys, because even if right now, even if I had a howler monkey baby right now, that some loggers killed the mother and I had this baby and I was taking care of it and giving it milk, when it starts to eat leaves, I don't know what leaves the baby howler monkey eats. I also am not going to be able to socialize the howler monkey so that it can interact with other howler monkeys. There's more complexity that goes into an animal than just the animal. You know, you having an animal in a box, you know, like the de-extinction people think you can just bring back a woolly mammoth and it's a woolly mammoth. It's like, without their environment, without their culture and their family and their context, both animals and people sort of change their meaning. It's a different thing. And so Magali has really focused on rewilding howler monkeys, because so many of the loggers and gold miners hunt howler monkeys for food, and so they'll kill a mother and the babies will come in, and at Amazon Shelter they've been able to give these babies emergency care, get them back to health, and then integrate them with a troop, eventually rewilding them into a place where there's wild jungle, like at Junglekeepers, where there's tons of habitat. And even then, you have to be careful that other groups of howler monkeys don't mess with them. I've seen Magali save all kinds of animals: howler monkeys, spider monkeys, coatis, peccaries, sloths. I mean, she's just Mother Earth in the Amazon rainforest. Absolutely incredible human, and it's one of the most proud things that I have, because Junglekeepers actually helps to fund Amazon Shelter. So while we're protecting the habitat, we're also rescuing orphaned animals through Amazon Shelter and the incredible work that Magali's doing. On the phone, she told me how to make a solution to remove the mites. That's the first thing. Let's get this bird cleaned up. So we made a solution. We were able to remove the mites, or at least to begin that process. And then next came removing those horrendous botflies. Now for this part, I was trying not to gag. I had some gloves, I had tweezers, and we started working on it. It was, you know, you're always conflicted between immobilizing the animal and causing it pain. And so I had no idea, you know, birds, like reptiles, are not very facially expressive. They're not like mammals where you can see what's going on. You don't know how much pain you're causing this bird. And so I was being extremely gentle, removed all of the foreign bodies that I could, all of those dried up looking bot flies. They were under the skin. And once that had been done, the next thing on the list was wondering how long it had been since this animal had had any kind of nourishment. And so toucans eat a lot of fruits and berries. They also specialize in baby birds and other sources of protein, lizards, all that kind of stuff. They have those big bills for a reason. They're actually pretty amazing predators. And so we started out with fruit. What we did was we cut some bamboo, we cut some yellow bamboo, and we didn't have a syringe handy, so I used a piece of large bamboo and then a smaller piece as a plunger, and we used leaves as a stopper, and then mashed up some fruit, held his beak open, and little toucan was fed. Now, I don't like to use cages, so what we did was we tied a branch up at the research station and put the toucan bloop, on there. We knew that we'd cleaned him up, removed the parasites, removed the foreign bodies, given him a meal. We'd done everything that we could for this toucan, and when we went to bed that night, I just remember thinking, I hope he's still alive in the morning. And when we woke up the next morning, that's when I was truly shocked, because I was expecting to find a dead bird, and what we found was little Lucas rant, 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 just hopping around the deck looking for humans. He'd already learned that people were where food comes from, and so by the next morning, he still couldn't fly, but he would hop off the perch and hop along the ground and try and come find one of us. And we realized very quickly, you don't have to use the syringe. You could just give him a spoon and he'll just take papaya and mango and banana right out of your hands, no problems. You didn't want to get your fingers too close, because that beak, while he was small, that beak was strong. And it's a good thing that the bird was small too, because if he had an attitude and absolutely no hesitation about eating every single thing that he saw. Over the next few weeks, he became a fixture at the station. Every morning he would be there hopping around the deck, looking for food, waiting outside the kitchen for the staff to arrive so that he could get his fruit in the morning. And we started supplementing his diet. We started giving him some crickets and grasshoppers, and gradually he started getting healthier. And the first sign of that was blue. The blue around his eyes started to just get a little bit more vibrant, and you could just tell his energy was up. And every night when we would go to bed, he would sit on his perch, he would tuck his beak into his wing, and every morning he would be there to greet us. And so the thing is, when you're rehabilitating animals, the most important thing is that you get the animal ready to go back into the wild. That's the best case scenario. You don't want to have a captive animal on your hands. You want to rewild the animal. And so by keeping him free, we figured we were allowing him the chance to be as wild as possible. And of course, living here, you could hear the sounds of other toucans. He could hear macaws flying by. You know, he's getting things that are from this forest. So not removing him and taking him to another facility seemed like the right choice. Another time that this was important was back when I was 19 years old. This was my favorite rescue that I've ever done. JJ told me that there was a giant anteater baby downriver that someone had shot the mother and they were taking care of the baby. And when we arrived, there was nobody there, and the woman who was living in the house, she went, "Yeah, we have a giant anteater." And we went, "Well, where is it?" And she went, "Well, it's out in the forest." And we went, "This doesn't sound." I said, "I bet you they don't even have a real giant anteater." Giant anteater was my favorite animal before I even got to the forest. So the thought of that real life had brought me an actual giant anteater. It just was too much to believe. But sure enough, this woman goes and stands there and she goes, "Lulu." And this anteater comes running out of the forest, walks right past the woman, climbs up my leg and into my arms and hugs me. It was one of the most incredible things that's ever happened. And we bargained with the woman, we begged this woman, we said, "This animal's gonna die if you don't give it to us to take care of it properly." And incredibly, she allowed us to take Lulu the anteater with us, and so we went upriver. Here's the thing about giant anteaters. They are incredibly strong. They're also much bigger than you think. Picture the largest German Shepherd you've ever seen with a 4-foot tail. The locals call it bear flag giant, oso bandera gigante, because they just don't know what to call them. They don't make any sense. These are animals with this super long cartilage nose and this big giant tail with a long tongue that can be, I think, almost 2 feet long, because they fire it down into ant and termite nests to get all that protein up, and they just go around the forest just feasting on them. I mean, this whole place is filled with ants and termites. And so giant anteaters are incredible. I think they have the superlative of having the largest claws in the mammal kingdom, which means that they somehow beat grizzly bears, which I find actually hard to believe. But what I do know is that they have these forearms. They have these forearms and they walk on their knuckles, and their claws. Just think of Edward Scissorhands or Wolverine or something, and then picture a tiny baby version of those things needing to give you a hug. Because the babies ride on their mother's back for the first 6 months of their lives, Lulu needed to be hugging someone at all times. And so since I was her primary caregiver, she would be hugging me, but that was always with claws. And so I had all these scratches on my ribs. I had all these torn shirts, torn pants. And the people that had started taking care of her had done it using, they didn't have a proper bottle with a nipple. So they had just used a plastic bottle, and they'd fit the spark plug protector from a chainsaw onto this bottle. And I thought it was so beautiful that they were giving milk and feeding this animal with a piece of rubber that was stolen from the most destructive demonic force that is destroying the entire Amazon rainforest. The chainsaw was giving life to this little animal. So to keep that going, I kept that spark plug protector, and I kept making her milk. And every time I would make Lulu milk, I would have to, back in those days, we didn't have anything out here. We were out here for weeks on end with no resupply. So all we had was a bunch of cans of powdered milk. And so I'd have to mix her powdered milk, and I would add things to it from the jungle to supplement it, like some crushed up ants and termites. But as I was mixing that solution, she would be so excited for food that she would be chasing me around the deck. So I'd be running in circles with this anteater on her knuckles, just galloping behind me. And I would have to go up on the table, and then she would climb up on the table, and then I would come down, and then she would come down. And if she got me, she would grab onto my leg and try to climb. And then, of course, it would just tear the pants right down the seams. And that was the end of that, and I had just scars all over my body. But the best thing about being with Lulu was that she was just so loving. You just don't realize the emotional connection these animals have with each other, that the mother anteaters care for their babies so much that if a jaguar comes, they use those giant claws. They stand up on their hind legs, they hunch up, they put their claws forward, they protect their nose, and they can fight off a jaguar. And so these anteaters are incredible animals, and I spent weeks and weeks taking care of Lulu every day, and I would fall asleep in the hammock with her, and she'd snore on me. And then the problem was, when she woke up and I wasn't awake yet, she would take her anteater nose and put it against my nose. She'd find the first hole she saw, and I guess we do kind of have that in common. But she would fire that tongue, which, you know, is this long, and that tongue would go boom right up my nose and come out my mouth, but like 10 times in a second, like whack, 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 really quick. And I would go from sleeping to very awake very quick. And I'd try and lift Lulu off of me, and she would just tear into me with those claws. She was a wild, wild animal to have, but I learned so much taking care of her, because I learned about that, you know, you never would expect a giant anteater to be something that has a close emotional bond with its parent. You know, you'd never expect a giant anteater to be something that needs to know how and where to find food. But animals learn these things from their parents. For instance, if you've ever heard the statistic that there's more captive tigers in the United States than there are left in the wild, several people at different times have said to me, well, why don't we just take, you know, if there's a few thousand tigers left in the wild, but there's even more in captivity, why don't we release those captive tigers into the wild? That's a great question, but it actually, when you look in the context of a real tiger, it makes no sense, because tigers learn from their mother how to hunt. Tigers have culture. Tigers get that knowledge only from their mothers, and to the best of my knowledge, no human has ever been able to successfully rewild a tiger, because a mother tiger teaches her young how to stalk, how to become invisible, where to find deer, how to be downwind of them, all these complex things that only she can teach that we don't know how to do. If somebody asked you to stalk up close enough on some deer and then explode out running and then grab them by the neck, you wouldn't be able to do it, but mother tigers know how to do that. And in some parts of India, mother tigers have their specific ways of hunting. I think in the north of India, there was one mother tiger that specialized in chasing sambar deer into water, because once the deer hit the water, it would slow them down, and the tiger is faster in the water, and so she would just take this big leap, land on their back, and take them out while they were in the water. And then she taught her cubs to do that. And so there's these little examples of animal culture that give us an insight into the animal mind. And there's a great book by Frans de Waal, I think, that's called Are We Smart Enough to Understand How Smart Animals Are, or something like that. And more often than not, I have found that the answer is probably not, because we have a hard time putting ourselves inside their minds. It's so different than us. And so Lulu the anteater was great, because I had to walk around the forest with her on my back. I had to really nurture her needs. And if she didn't get her needs met, if she didn't get that affection, she would act out. She would destroy things. She would run away. She would start making sounds, which I didn't even know that giant anteaters made sounds. I learned so much taking care of her. And then with Lucas, the toucan, you know, after a week or so, you start seeing the blue coming back in his face. You start seeing a couple of feathers start to poke through, and the skin stopped looking as gray and dry and chapped, and it started to look a little bit more healthy. Still not great, but a little bit less horrendous. And Lucas just got better and better and better. And I figured out that we could mash up some butterflies and crickets and supplement the protein in his diet, and that would make him recover even quicker. And it was just a pleasure having him around. You know, I started doing things like taking him out back here where we have a little clearing and putting him on my finger and just sort of running around with him, just sort of running and letting him open his wings a little bit. If you've ever handled a hawk or an eagle, or ever, you know, been with anybody that does falconry, if you have a bird on your arm and you want them to open their wings, you just turn your arm. As soon as you turn your arm, they open their wings to stabilize. And so for Lucas, what I would do is just turn my finger a little bit, and he would open his wings to stabilize, and then I would just zoom him around a little bit, and he would, you know, get a feel for the air, feel that lift a little bit. And so then, as he got better at that, I would run in circles with Lucas and try and encourage him to fly. But he didn't need much encouragement, because pretty soon what he started doing was, during the day, he didn't like being in the station. He wanted to be in the trees around the station. And so he would start hopping over to the railings and then sitting in the tree all day, right next to the research station, right next to the people, where he felt safe, where there was no, you know, hawks or falcons that were going to poach him. But he stayed by us, and then as soon as he was hungry, rant, 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 he would start with that sound, and it would just be like, I'm hungry, j'ai faim, I need food, you know, come over here. And it would be like, all right, somebody's got to feed Lucas. And if we didn't do it quick enough, then he was on the ground hopping towards us, and he'd start biting your feet. He was crazy, crazy little bird, little wild man. And that's the thing too, is that, you know, you start to see their personalities so much. When I was living with elephants, there was one day where my favorite elephant, he came up to me, and I was trying to write in my journal. Now with elephants, you're dealing with a whole different magnitude. You know, you're talking about from a bird to an anteater to a cat or a dog. Elephants, you're dealing with, you know, a non-human being. These are aliens in the sense that they don't look like us, but in terms of intelligence, I actually think that elephants might be as intelligent as people, but in a very, very different way. And so one of the days that my elephant wanted attention, I was trying to write in my journal. I was trying to write a book in my journal, and I'm sitting there, and he kept coming over with his trunk and just bothering me. And he just wanted some attention, So with his trunk, he'd come and try to steal my pen, and I was like, get out of here, man. And he'd try and steal my pen again, and I was like, man, stop it. I told you to stop it. And the third time he did it, I like clapped my hands, and I said, you stop it. I said, you stop it right now. And he got so upset, he flapped his ears, and he went over there, and he put his trunk in his mouth, and he bit onto his trunk, and he felt bad. And then I had to stop writing and go console him and give him a rub on the head and give him a kiss and tell him I loved him. And then he told me he wanted bananas by pushing me towards bananas. With Lucas the toucan, after several weeks, it became clear that not only was he gonna live, he was thriving. And so he was staying in the trees, eating constant butterflies and crickets, tons of fruit, always playing with us. I was taking him out here, and then what I started to do was, he got to the point where I could throw him in the air and he would fly to the ground. And then I would go over there again, he would hop up onto my finger, and I'd kind of be like, you ready to go again? And he'd be like, yup. And then I would throw him in the air, and he'd open his wings, and he would fly to the ground. And it was like, we just do this again and again, and we're just building those wing muscles in a safe way. And then the fact that he would sleep in the trees, he was getting to know everything around the area there. And so you hold this little life in your hands, and you go, I'm going to take care of you, but I'm also going to protect your home. And so when I left, it was the last thing I wanted to do, because Lucas was doing amazing, and it was such a pleasure waking up every morning to that angry little psychopath trying to get food from us. But when I left, he had like a 5 o'clock shadow of white feathers coming in, and so it was no longer skin, it was turning into plumage. He was flying really well. I mean, we just loved him to death. It was such a beautiful bird. And I went back to the US and left him in the hands of my staff. And a few weeks later, the news that I got was that he'd been spending more and more time in the jungle once I left. You know, once the primary caregiver leaves, I think the animal's like, okay, cool, it's time for me to sort of get out there. And so they continue to leave food, but Lucas started going out into the jungle. And then there came a period where they didn't see him for a few days. And you always wonder, you know, was he ready? Did he die? Did he get eaten by something? And when Lucas showed up, this bird came back fully white, with all new plumage, looking beautiful, with a yellow-blue bill. Thankfully, one of my staff was able to get a video. They gave him food. He didn't even want it. He was out in the jungle getting his own meals. And that was the last time Lucas came by. He came by just to sort of show off the toucan that he had become, and how beautiful, just absolute pristine white feathers, black feathers, all those colors in full saturation, just absolutely beautiful animal, fully wild. So now every time we're out in the forest and we hear the toucan calls, we just imagine Lucas flying through the canopy, and we're so proud of the fact that we were able to rehabilitate and help this little bird. Now, if you're watching this and you want to get into rehabilitating animals, please remember that wherever you live, the most important thing is that you go and defer to experts, because people get it wrong all the time. They find a baby bird on the ground and they assume that it needs help when it doesn't actually need help. It's just its first day out of the nest, and this is part of how that baby bird is going to learn to fly. A lot of times animals figure it out on their own. I have to emphasize that, you know, please defer to your local animal rescue centers. They're the ones that know the best. And most of the animals that I've rescued out in the wild have been because we literally can't get them back to a facility, because I'm certainly not an absolute expert at this, even though I've done it many, many times. One of my favorites was we were out here and we found this big yellow-tailed crebo, this big snake that was very, very messed up. She had a lot of wounds on her, and we pulled her in, and I remember at the time we had a stethoscope, and I remember at the time listening to her heartbeat, and that was just an incredible sound. The sound of a snake's heartbeat was wild to hear. And we gave her water. We made sure she had water. You don't really need to feed, you know, snakes only eat every couple of days or every couple of weeks anyway, so it was a big enough snake. She had enough meat in her body. We removed all the parasites, removed all the ticks, made sure she had water, and over time she healed up enough, and on her last day, we brought her out into the forest, and she thanked us by letting us handle her a little bit, and then we released her, and boom, that yellow just went snaking off into the jungle, gone. Success. Not long after we released Lulu the Anteater, we had deployed camera traps, and there's this one great video. It was about a year after I released her, and she had come back, and this camera trap was right here behind the station, and she came back, and she had a baby on her back, and she was just sniffing the camera trap that I had just touched, and so it had my scent all over it, and she comes up and she sniffs the camera trap, and then she turns as she walks by, and it's almost like, look, I got my baby. You know, it's something though that really humbles you when you realize that we're not the only creatures on this planet. You know, you hear about that we're losing ecosystems and we're losing species, and unless you work with animals, unless you really connect with them, I think that it can be shocking how deep their hearts are and how strong their bonds are. You know, anybody that has a dog or a cat, you know, you've been around other people that have said, you know, like the conversation about whether or not animals have emotions. Well, of course they have emotions. We've seen our dog feel scared or ashamed or excited, and it's just like us. And so in the wild, we have even less access, you know, because you see a fox go by quickly, you get a glimpse of it and you feel that excitement, but it's gone. You have no insight into their actual lives. You see an eagle fly by, and it's, you know, it's a quick vision, and then, you know, all you're left with is a beautiful image, but you don't actually understand what it means to be an eagle, to be a jaguar out in the Amazon rainforest. And so being able to interact with Lucas for a few weeks was a chance to actually understand what the personality of a toucan is like. What do they need? What do they like to eat? How do they behave? And so seeing what a little psychopath he was, and how aggressive he was, and how much fight he had to live was just incredible. And watching how he hunted grasshoppers, big grasshoppers, you know, he wasn't that big. He was hunting grasshoppers that were the size of a stapler. He would grab these things and just bash them against a branch and then pop them back. And you go, man, this thing's a serious predator. Like, I feel bad for the other birds. When this toucan gets out there, he's gonna use that long beak to just pull baby birds out of their nest and eat them. And nature is metal, but it's also so beautiful. And so every time I get to see a new species up close, it's a chance to really learn and deepen my connection with nature. And so the times that one time I rescued a sloth out of the river and got to bring it back onto a branch. And with Lulu the Anteater, I mean, I needed no convincing on the fact that I love giant anteaters, but now they're part of my heart. I love giant anteaters, and I think they're the most amazing, intelligent, emotional animals. But nothing, of course, compares to the time that I've spent with elephants, walking beside them, the absolute size of them, and the fact that when it comes to elephants, you're not just talking about, they know whether you're scared, whether you're happy, whether you're stressed, when you had your last period, whether or not you're pregnant. They can tell what's going on with us on a level that we can't. And walking beside elephants is just, it's just incredible. And again, usually when do people see elephants? They see elephants on a safari where the elephants are moving away from a loud safari jeep, and there's people and there's cameras, and so the elephants are acting differently with the paparazzi in their face. Or you see elephants at the zoo, where the elephant has been amputated from its environment, from its culture, from its herd, and you're just looking at an elephant in a box. Just like if they raised, you know, a child in the woods and it had no interaction with any other humans, and it had no idea how to speak, no idea how to use our tools, no idea how to do anything that we do, it would be more like a wild animal than a human, and especially if you kept it confined in a box, it wouldn't even be acting right. So when you looked at it, the things that you saw would not be very representative of a human. And for that reason, the one animal that I have had to rehabilitate at times, but that I don't specialize in, has been the primates. Every time that I've gotten a baby howler monkey or a baby spider monkey, they are the cutest thing in the world, I swear. Just a few months ago, one of the local communities brought us a baby howler monkey. They had shot the mother for food, and they brought us the baby hoping that we could rehabilitate it, and I kept it for 24 hours before we were able to take it to the experts at Amazon Shelter. And while I had this baby howler monkey, instantly, she wrapped her tail around my neck. Instantly, she said, thank God for warmth, for a body. They need that connection. And she was sleeping on my shoulder and I was rocking her to sleep. And I knew that this was the kind of animal that I did not have the skills to care for. So we made sure that we emergency got her to Amazon Shelter. There's times that we've had spider monkeys, which that's a whole other thing. They're ballistic. They're crazy. Spider monkeys, even as babies, there's nothing you can do. I had a spider monkey that I took care of some years ago where, you know, she at first was scared of me. She was living with these gold miners, and I would go and I would try to give her food, and she would kind of go, you know, scream at me and then run back to safety under this house. And then one night she came out and she just climbed onto my neck. She just knew that I was safe, and she wrapped her tail around my neck, and then that was it. I was the first loving, warm thing that spider monkey had felt in weeks, and so she wasn't going to let go. And so I had to go to sleep with a spider monkey around my neck. And so all night, anytime I moved position, she moved position. I woke up in the morning laying on my back, and there was little spider monkey turds all over my chest. And so then that day I went, you know, I woke up, I tried to shower, but I had a spider monkey on me. So I took a spider monkey shower, and she would not, like, anytime I tried to get her off my neck, she just started screaming, and it was so stressful. I just said, you know what? Keep her on my neck, it's fine. And so I went and ate breakfast, spider monkey. You know, we went out and we had work to do out in the jungle all day long, spider monkey on my neck. But there's a perfect example where I was not equipped to rehabilitate that animal long term. Could I keep her alive? Yeah. Could I care for her? Sure. But when she started to get a little bit bigger, you know, once you have a large animal that's hopping all over the place, that's going to make its own decisions, they're way too competitive with humans. I mean, I've had a spider monkey steal my hat and just refuse to give it back. And I'm like, give me my hat back. And you can tell that the monkeys are like, you can't have it. And they know what they're doing. They know that they stole something that you want that they have. And so with monkeys, I always defer to the experts because they are way too much trouble, more trouble than they're worth, and you got to put a diaper on them, that whole thing. But if I've learned anything from taking care of all these different kinds of animals, it's that all eyes speak the same language. And that's why it's so crucial that people support the work that Junglekeepers does. If it's your first time here, Junglekeepers is a Peruvian nonprofit organization that protects over 97,000 acres of the rainforest behind me, the Amazon rainforest. It's indigenous-led, empowering for local people. We turn loggers and gold miners into conservation rangers, and what we're protecting out in that 97,000 acres is hundreds of millions of heartbeats, just like all the animals that you just saw. We're empowering the local conservation leaders to actually protect their forest before it's too late. We're saving the ancient forest and all the animals before the bulldozers and the fires and the chainsaws get to them. And the way that we do that is people like you all over the world. All we ask is that you join our monthly donor program, $5, $10, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. But if enough people support us all over the world, it makes it possible for us to work with the local people to stop the destruction, change the narrative of conservation, and make it so that this world can keep living and that our children will have a world that's as green and as healthy as the one that we grew up in. See you guys next week.